We are just 12 days away from the start of the 2023 Minnesota Vikings season. Today, we got clarity on who is going to be on the roster. Why does it matter? Why doesn't it matter? And what are the biggest takeaways from the Vikings' initial 53-man roster? We're here to talk all about it here on the Real Forno Show.
Welcome to the Real Forno Show, hosted by Tyler Fornes, the managing editor of USA Today's Vikings Wire, writer for the College Football Network, publisher of Substack Run In Shooter, host of The Good, The Bad, and The Hungry on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, as well as a founding member of Vikings First and SKOL.
You are looking live on a Tuesday evening here on the Real Forno Show. I'm your host, Tyler Fornes. With me as always in the top right corner, his name is producer Dave, who is just a few short hours away from owing me a bottle of bourbon. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good, and I look forward to paying you that bottle of bourbon if that turns out to be the case.
Yep, and we will get into that here later, but this might be a little bit of an abbreviated episode. It depends on how long we end up talking about the Vikings 53-man roster, because it was made official today. And the Vikings 53-man roster is, well, Dave, it's interesting. And I think what's really important to note here is, even though it's official, it's far from official, because waivers will run tomorrow at noon. And because they run tomorrow at noon, there could be a multitude of changes. And I think that's really important. And I think I actually have a dog at my door, so I'm going to go check that real quick.
You go check that. I'm going to say hello to everybody who's in the chat. Vincent, Aaron down here with me. All nice. What do you think of today's weather there, Aaron? Almost chilly. Patrick Harms, the lovely and beautiful Miss Mary. Gary's here. Norsefius, of course, is here after working on some backsplashes. Harms, Michael, anybody else I missed? SKOL for life. Absolutely there, buddy. Good to see you here as well. And, of course, Justin of Purple and Gold for Days. We are happy to see you. And Aaron showing the freezing emoji. Up on the tickers right now, I have the rules that go over the cut down days. That's on that top one that you see rolling by. Obviously, we passed the deadline to get to where we need to go. And yes, Norsefius, I agree with you on that one. So, and on the bottom, we have the team. I will also put up who was waived or cut or whomever, so you have them for reference as we go through the show. Now, people always ask me, Dave, what are you sipping? Well, today, Aaron can vouch for this. Still Austin straight bourbon. It's distilled here in town. Absolutely fabulous. It's 98.4 proof, and it is a good local bourbon with that little bit of Texas funk I like so much. So that's to answer your question there, Gary. And I see a puppy dog briefly. The biggest complaint so far is the cutting of Luigi.
All right. Let's have a conversation here. So, Lily Claire decided to get into some mischief.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, fun stuff. But we're okay. I just had to chase around a little bit, and I am not nearly in as good a shape as I was a decade ago. Let me tell you. But that's okay. She's sitting good in my lap. And let's talk about this roster. So, right after it got released, I wrote 9 major takeaways from the roster, and I think we're going to start on offense. They kept Jaren Hall. Of course, they were going to keep Jaren Hall because the third quarterback rule. And I thought it was important that they ended up doing just that. And like, I'm trying to think of the right way to phrase this. Look, he's a developmental guy. We'll see what happens. That's really all there's to it. But honestly, the skill positions were really intriguing. Only kept 3 running backs, and not including CJ Ham. So technically 4 in the backfield. Well, they waived DeWayne McBride, and they kept Kene Nwangwu. Now, here's the thing with Kene. If they don't, he was never placed on PUP, so they can't just place him on PUP. That's not how that works. They'd have to place him on injured reserve. In order to do that and not be out for the season, you have to be on the initial 53-man roster. Are the Vikings looking to put him on injured reserve tomorrow afternoon and either one bringing back bringing back DeWayne McBride, or are they just going to be looking to add a veteran? Because I think Alexander Madison's fine as your running back 1. I don't love it, but he's fine. And I think Ty Chandler's a fine running back 2, who I believe has a lot of upside. After that, there's nothing there. And I think a veteran could be coming in to be one of those guys.
Named Hunt?
Maybe. I'm starting to look at and potentially write a piece for Vikings where I'm kind of looking at who could be those guys. I think Myles Gaskin, just released from the Miami Dolphins, is an intriguing option. Got experience in this system, really good pass catcher, can do a lot of different things. And I think that's important here.
Now, with vested vets, are they going to wait until after week 1?
I don't, because of how they ended up keeping the roster, I don't think, like, I opined about that yesterday, where they would cut vets and then bring them back. Well, they kept Jonathan Bullard. They kept Brandon Powell. I really don't think that they're going to be doing that. Maybe with Joejuan Williams, who was far and away the biggest cut today. He was the biggest cut of all of them. And I was honestly surprised because I thought he was pretty good and he provided depth. Look, you don't want him starting, but he's a capable player. He was getting work with the ones in nickel situations, and I thought he looked good. But the Vikings decided to move on. Maybe that's the veteran thing that you were kind of mentioning. Maybe they bring him back after week 1, so they don't have to fully guarantee his contract. I don't know, but to me, the moves that they made weren't signaling procedural, and they were signaling these are the guys we want on our roster, and that's the way they made it work.
Well,
so
what I'm asking is, obviously, I think Kene is going to go to IR for however many weeks.
We don't know that. That's just a guess.
That's just my theory. I think they'll probably bring in somebody, but like on the offensive line, may they wait on those veterans, the vested veterans, until after week 1 before they pull them in. They may, Kene may go on IR tomorrow, and then we hear that they move McBride. McBride goes to the practice squad if he makes it through waivers, and then they pull him up for week 1 off the practice squad as a designated player, and then he goes back down, and then they bring in Kareem Hunt or said veteran. You take your pick, and then they have him on the squad at that point, and at the price they want or the non-guarantee they want.
Mm-hmm. Maybe, but all these guys were on minimum deals, so the only way, the only way you make that move is if you're going to want to move on from them mid-season. And
Yeah, but you're talking about the vested vets we released. I'm talking about somebody like Kareem Hunt or somebody out there that's going to make more than just a veteran minimum.
If you're putting Kene Nwangwu on IR, you're not running with 2 running backs in week 1. You're going to bring somebody in right away. I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, I think what I'm saying is they put Kene on it. They sign McBride to the practice squad. They activate McBride for week 1. And then week 2, McBride goes back to the practice squad and they sign said veteran who's out there in the ether right now, like Kareem Hunt or whomever, and there was a good list put up by somebody that they could bring in, and then thus their salary is no longer guaranteed, and then they can play them week to week if they work out. If not, they can release them.
Okay, that makes some sense. Yeah, that's a possibility. I don't know if the Vikings are going to, they've been pretty shrewd with how they've wanted to maneuver with the cap. I don't know if Kwesi's just going to want to be like, you know what? We didn't believe enough in McBride to keep him on the roster to just elevate him week 1. I don't think that necessarily fits, but it's a definite possibility. And I'm not going to say that it's not going to happen, but I don't personally see it. But we'll see how things end up working. I think the receiver position is where the most intrigue is right now as far as the skill positions. The Vikings did keep 6. Justin Jefferson, probably the biggest surprise keep of the day. KJ Osborne, Jordan Addison, Jalen Naylor, Brandon Powell, and Jalen Reagor made the team. Now, there were reports earlier, and you kind of opined on it yesterday, that they showcased him in that final preseason game, that teams were making calls. And because teams were making calls, that could be the Vikings were trying to garner up some interest and get teams bidding against each other, or that came from other teams, but likely came from the Vikings. The way that read, that was definitely a Vikings league. So Reagor, they were obviously shopping him, hoping to be able to bring in some kind of capital for him. That doesn't necessarily mean they want to get rid of him. It just means they want to try and get some capital back. They probably do want to get rid of him, but if they can't get the right capital, maybe they just keep him. And quite frankly, the way he played, it's pretty good. He did a pretty good job. Oh, hey, Odie, welcome to the show. He did a really good job. Can you bring me a wipe? I got poop on my hand. Thank you. Yeah, it's okay. It's just eclair. It's just a tiny bit, but that's the life of being a dog owner, especially when they're small. And I think with Reagor, no matter what you do, you'll be okay. Odie is literally spread eagle in the back, just like, he's having a good time. Somebody's going to clip that. It's going to be a really good one. Thank you.
Well, I think if they traded Reagor, they're going to
go with mama.
Seeing what Kwesi's doing, I don't think he's going to take a huge loss on that. He would have to probably get close to what we traded for him, and the whole is upgradable from a 4th, from a 5th to a 4th. That whole BS that went along with that trade, I think he'd be looking for that, and he probably didn't get it from anybody. So he says, no, he's playing well, and he is this preseason. I've been impressed with him so far. He hasn't made any of those stupid mistakes. And so this is, we're going to keep him.
Yeah, you might as well keep him. It's like he's turning into a better football player, and that's the kind of growth you want to see from somebody who's really talented. Everybody thought Reagor's talented. He's just never been able to put it together. And that aspect is what's been really frustrating, why the Eagles moved on from him, and why the Vikings, barely played him at the end of the year, because that Indianapolis Colts game was a disaster. And the tough part about Reagor is it's not like you can just cut him. You're going to absorb his salary no matter what. Now, we did find out that he does have offset language. So if a team signs him, let's say they give him that veteran minimum and it's $1.1 million. Well, the Vikings would get a cap credit next year of $1.32 million. So they wouldn't have to fully pay everything in total cap charges, but they wouldn't get the relief until next year. So I don't think the Vikings are going to want to make that kind of commitment to getting rid of him when he's playing capable. Now, if he was bad again, yeah, you probably just dump him. But he wasn't. He ended up being pretty good. And I think that's important. Now, when we transition over to tight ends, I'll say this one more thing about the wide receivers. Tristan Jackson's going to make the practice squad. And guys like Lucky Jackson looked good. So the Vikings keep 2 or 3 guys on the practice squad. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. So this is a talented group of players. But
and they kept 6 wide receivers.
Yep. I think Brandon Powell's going to end up being the punt return guy. I think he earned that job. And he actually played pretty good as a wide receiver, which has not been something he's done throughout the course of his career. He's been a slot guy. He's been a gadget guy. But he was being a legit wide receiver. And I think that was impressive. Something that we hadn't necessarily seen from him before. So I think that's objectively great. Now, can he keep that up? Can he do that in the regular season? Can he do that when he gets punched in the mouth by a press man corner on the outside? I don't know. We're going to find that out. But what we've seen so far has been objectively really good. And I think this is a really talented group of receivers that goes deep. And if you have to play wide receiver 6 for, like, say, 20 snaps in a game, you're going to feel pretty okay about that. You don't love it. You feel okay. And I think that's important.
Well, hopefully we're not down to a wide receiver 6 in a game.
No, but I think that speaks to what the depth is, where he is that, like, this is good. And I think when you look at the wide receiver position, we're in a good spot. And tight end is kind of the same way. We end up keeping 4. We talked about if Nick Muse would make the team. Right now, he has made the team. Can he grow that? Can he improve? Can he keep his roster spot? I don't know if he's going to keep the roster spot through the next couple days. The Vikings only have 8 offensive linemen. They only have 5 defensive linemen. They kept 6 safeties. Yes, they kept 6 safeties, something we talked about yesterday of being a real possibility because Theo Jackson played really well in the preseason and training camp. And he's a young guy. He was a 6th round pick last year by the Titans and they cut him. You have 6 talented safeties who you'd feel relatively comfortable with playing a decent amount of snaps. Well, if you want to bulk up cornerback, which only is, I'm calling it 4.5, because NaJee Thompson is a special teams weapon. He's technically listed as a corner. He's not a corner. So being that you have NaJee as one of your corners, you are going to want to add at least one more to the roster. So you have to find a roster spot for that. You have to find a roster spot for a running back if you don't put Kene Wangu on injured reserve. Ooh, JT O'Sullivan is Hall's game up on the QB channel. I will be watching that. JT O'Sullivan is awesome. And you have to find room for another offensive lineman, another defensive lineman, because you only have 5. Tight end is probably the first position to take a hit. Either that or safety. So that's going to be something to watch. Muse's performance was good enough to make the team. Quite frankly, I thought if Ben Sims would have made the team, I wouldn't have had too big of an issue with it. Sims played pretty well, especially in that last game where he over the last couple, he was a really nice receiving threat, and he could also block on the line of scrimmage, which is what I thought his best attribute was coming out of Baylor. Like, this skill set group is very, very good, and there are some tough decisions made.
Yeah, I agree. And we're fat in a few groups, and those are the ones we're going to look at to if they start bringing in people to fill in other spots that are going to suddenly be released and hopefully clear waivers. Because we have the initial waivers, everybody today, and it all gets processed tomorrow by noon Eastern. So by 11 o'clock, we're going to start hearing names coming into the practice squad. Once you get done, and then once you get that done, then if they start to bring in people, they'll move people on the waivers, and it won't be. A lot of teams have already said, well, we've already built our practice squads. We're not, or our rosters. we don't want to snag this guy, and they tend to clear a little bit better that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're gonna see how it works. And Dave, something everybody watching and listening to this show needs to know how it works is Fans First Sports. See, one ticket giveaway. Now, what do they need to know about, and how do they get involved and potentially win 2 tickets to any week 1 game of their choice?
Not 2, 4.
Oh, look at me. I forgot how to count. I've been trying to count all day, and it escaped me.
No, it's you get to go, and 3 of your best friends, family, or whomever you want.
Even
3 of
people
your mistresses, if you want to roll that way. It's whoever you want. All you've got to do is go over to contest.fansfirstsports.com, and I'll throw it in the remarks here shortly, and fill out the appropriate information. And you will have a chance to win 4, count them, 4 free tickets to the week 1 game of your choice. Now, most of us, that's at US Bank Stadium. Well, not all of us, like me, are near US Bank Stadium. And if there's some game nearby that you wanted to attend, you could put in for that too. There's no problem. There's 4 free tickets up to a value of $5,000. That's $1,250 a ticket. A $1,250 ticket in most stadiums gets you a primo seat. And so all you have to do, again, is go over to contest.fansfirstsports.com and fill out the appropriate information, and you will have a chance to win. The contest to win these runs through September 4th. So that gives FFSN, Fans First Sports Network, time to notify the winner that they have the tickets and which game they want. So, like I said, just go over there, fill it out. Doesn't cost you a dime to go out there and put in that information, and hopefully you win those 4 free tickets.
Hell,
and the ticket
yeah.
placements are of your choosing, right? They're going to say, hey, if you want to go to US Bank, here's the open spots, here's the tickets available. Pick the 4 you want, up to $5,000. So if you want to pick up one for $4,000, if there's a seat in US Bank for $4,000, you want that, and you want to put your 3 buddies up in the nosebleeds, they'll do that too.
Boom. Go get your free tickets. And then when you win, make sure you tell them that Forno and Dave sent you. Make sure you tell them. All right. Let's get back to this. We had a question from Gary a little bit ago if we knew how the NFL came up with 53. I'm going to be honest. The only thing I can think of is they did 22 on offense, 22 on defense, one player at each position, 1 backup, and then you have your 3 specialists. So that's 47. After that, you just have 6 wild card spots. That's the only thing I can really think of. I don't know how they officially got to 53. I'd have to do some research and see if I can find that out. I think 53 is more of an arbitrary number than anything. But maybe my research, when I take a look, will tell me something different.
I had heard that earlier in the week. Where does the number 53 come from? And people start thinking, well, you got 11 backups. That's 22. That's 44 plus 3. That gives you 47. Where did the extra 6 come from?
Yeah. The only thing I could think of is wild card spots where you can kind of use it wherever you want. A lot of teams, would keep 3 quarterbacks, and back in the day, you needed 3 quarterbacks because quarterbacks very rarely started 16 games in a season. And that's something that we saw consistently until about the last decade. And even now, quarterbacks are still missing games, but you don't invest the time into a backup quarterback like you did, I always go to the 1990s Houston Oilers, the early days, Warren Moon. I mean, I don't know if you can see it. He's right there. And they developed Cody Carlson for 8 years. And then they gave him the job, and well, he stunk in 1994. But they developed him, and they had him as the backup, and he was able to step in and play well enough. And I think that's important. That's something that you want to have on your roster. And back in the day, you needed that and another guy. You had a really good backup, and you had a developmental guy. Think of the Vikings. 1998, Brad Johnson, your starter. Randall Cunningham, your backup. You know who quarterback 3 was, Dave? Jay Fiedler, who ended up starting multiple seasons with the Miami Dolphins. And he ended up with the Jacksonville Jaguars in 99. And then I think 2021 is when he ended up taking over. He took over for Dan Marino. And I think that's something that we could really use more of, but it hasn't been prioritized. With this third quarterback rule, I think it's going to come back into vogue. I think we're going to start seeing more and more and more. I'm really intrigued to see how that ends up playing out. But to really go back to Gary's question, I don't know. I don't know how they came up with 53. My guess is 22, 3, and 6. But that's just a guess.
And
it's
what
just
the 6 are is the question.
Yeah. 6 was just wild card spots, whatever you want. That's my guess. Let's continue on with this roster because there is a lot of intrigue to talk about. And we'll move on to the offensive line. And the offensive line itself, only 8 players. We have our 5 starters. Austin Schlottman, Oli Udoh, Blake Brandel, Chris Reed. I was wrong in this. I thought he would have to stay on the roster. But with the NFI and the PUP, you can just stay on the lists. You don't have to wait until waivers fully clear tomorrow at 11 a.m. So that's important. And he ends up just going right onto NFI. He'll miss at least the first 4 weeks. But it also means we have a hole on the offensive line. And I thought maybe there's a chance they could keep Jack Snyder. They didn't. They didn't keep anybody else on the offensive line. And now you're in a position where you probably need to find an offensive lineman to at least bring in for a few weeks. And I think the Vikings are going to be active in trying to acquire those guys, whether it be through a trade, waivers, or free agency, because this could be a Dalton Risner spot if Risner, because to my knowledge, he wanted to start. And I don't think the Vikings were willing to guarantee that. And that's hypothetically, why we didn't actually bring him in. That's kind of me just putting pieces together and me trying to figure out in my head. So
I heard he wanted guarantees to start and he wanted $8 million. And they told him no.
I'll be honest, that's not exactly unfair financially. He's a pretty dang good guard. Like $8 million is not crazy. But yeah, the Vikings were going to give him that. But now that the season is starting, maybe he's willing to change his tune. Maybe he's willing to take a little bit of a smarter deal, a better financial deal for the Vikings. We'll see. Gary asked me to predict when we add Risner. I don't think we end up adding Risner for the reasons that Dave kind of laid out. But that concept is, I think, something that the Vikings are probably going to do, and adding an offensive lineman to the back end of this roster.
And there was plenty released in the last couple of days that I want time to take a look at and see who was released, to see if there's any good vets that might fit that role that would be a good fit to bring in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree completely. And we'll see how things end up kind of working out that way. Ian says $8 million to get a solid guard and help Kirk and a young running back crew worth it. Is Risner going to be that much better than Ezra Cleveland? That's the big question. I don't have an answer to that. And if you can't tell me he's going to be that much better than Ezra Cleveland, I'm not going to give him $8 million. If you're a guy at this stage, $8 million to come in and start at guard, he better be better than the guy that he's replacing. And you know what? Maybe it's Ed Ingram. Well, he better be a lot better than Ed Ingram. You're paying him $8 million. That's a sizable amount of money. And my philosophy is guards don't matter. And that philosophy means you just want average. I think Ed Ingram's going to end up being an average guard this year. And that is going to make a big difference for this Minnesota Vikings team. Average guard play is going to be huge.
Right.
Why?
If they're already good at run blocking. Now I want to see them step up to get to average on pass blocking, all that interior three. They do that, we're going to be fine.
And I think the shift to the more Shanahan-inspired offense, where they're utilizing more 12 personnel, where they're utilizing more rollouts and play action, I think those things are going to make a much, much bigger difference. And when it comes to how these interior linemen are going to be pressured. And I think that makes a difference. Like Rizer's biggest issue is he's my size. He's 6'6". He struggles with leverage and straight line power. Well, his pass blocking was much better than his run blocking. His run blocking was worse than Ed Ingram's last year per PFF. Like it was like 55. Ingram's was in like the 60s or 70s. And when you take a look at Ingram, he needs to clean up technique. And the idea and the construct of cleaning up technique is incredibly simple. Actually cleaning up technique, Dave, and somebody like yourself who's played offensive line, it is not that simple. It's about teaching your feet and your body to move in a different way, because you start to develop habits. You start to develop, if I'm at my desk, I know that I keep my pens at about 2:00. Well, if I move them to 4:00, when I grab here, it's not there. All of a sudden I just got beat for a sack. And some of that muscle memory stuff matters. And that's why going from the left side to the right side can be incredibly difficult for people, because everything's backwards. A former offensive lineman, and I don't remember who said it, and I would give them credit if I did. Going from the left side to the right side is like trying to write a paper with your left hand and then all of a sudden switching and writing it with your right hand.
If you're not used to it, yes.
Yeah.
See, this is where tight ends go BS, because we are used to playing on both sides, depending on the play call. So we got used to switching back and forth.
That's different.
Right hand goes down on this play, left hand goes down on that play. This foot up, this foot back. And
that's different because you're doing that stuff consistently. Christian Darrisaw only plays left tackle. Right. So all of a sudden, if you ask him to go play right tackle when he was a left tackle in college, he's been a left tackle in the NFL.
Probably that's when you're left tackle through Pop Warner.
Yeah, that's when you're asking for things to go awry, because all of a sudden now you're asking him to do something completely different. Yeah, Aaron. The poop joke. Yeah, funny. Claire decided to poop on the floor. I have a 6-year-old rescue Frenchie, and she is half potty trained, and yeah, she's had a rough life, but she's okay now. But yeah, get all your poop jokes out. They're going to be done by the next episode. All right. So let's move on to the defensive line.
Offensive line. So poop fits perfectly.
Yeah. Offensive line's going to add somebody, and so is the defensive line. Defensive line kept 5 guys. The 3 that everybody knew they were going to keep: Harrison Phillips, Kyrus Tonga, Dean Lowry. They kept Jaquel and Roy. This one was a little bit of a surprise, because I thought he would be a procedural cut and bring back. They kept Jonathan Bullard. Bullard's been consistent, and he has played pretty well. He played well last year, but he also hurt his bicep pretty early in the year, and that hindered him from really being completely effective. And I think he's going to be able to take this to a different level. He's going to be able to do things and make that defensive line more solid. I don't think he's going to end up a starter like he was last year, because Harrison Phillips is going to be one of those edge guys. He's going to be the defensive ends. And because he's going to play defensive end, that kind of takes his position out of the deal. So I think having him is objectively good, and we'll see how much playing time he gets. I think he's going to end up being a really solid contributor, a rotational guy, and especially on like pass rush downs, I think you could slide him in as a 3 technique. You put Harrison Smith as a nose, and then you can have Jaquan and Roy do a bunch of funky stuff. Lowry and Tonga, I would guess you're probably going to have more on first and second down, but I think they're going to rotate all these guys pretty evenly. Like, this defensive line group probably needs one more, and this could be a situation where, at least for now, you bring in a couple guys on the defensive line on the practice squad. And because you bring them on the practice squad, you end up that elevating one here, one there. And I think that could be a really nice benefit for you. Yeah, this is going to be an interesting group. I think they're going to add one more.
Now,
but Dave,
Gary asked about we don't have a true penetrator on the defensive line, and I agree on the interior. We do not. I think Tonga can get some push, but I don't think we have a true penetrator. What I suspect, however, is that you're going to see Brian Flores start to move somebody like Davenport down on pass rushes, bring in that third edge rusher, and we're going to get the penetration that way in combination, so that we have penetration on the interior as well as the exterior. That is my assumption.
Yeah, very well could be. I thought they may keep Blacklock for that reason, because that's his entire job, was to be a quick twitch penetrator in the middle.
Maybe.
But Blacklock struggled with so many other things. I think defensive line is going to be a really big focus for the Minnesota Vikings coming up this next offseason. Like, they haven't ignored it, but they haven't prioritized it. And I think making it more of a priority is coming down the pipeline, especially when you're seeing defensive tackle almost become a premium position, with guys like Quinnen Williams getting big time money. And you hear Christian Wilkins is next. Chris Jones is holding out for his buku bucks. I've heard he wants like $30 million. I don't know if I give him $30 million, but I'd give him a lot of money because he is that good and that impactful.
Well, Dr. Eric Eager, friend of ours over on Super Sports, talks about how if you have a defensive tackle, interior guy that can get pass rush on a regular basis and dominate there, they are roughly equivalent to that premier edge guy. And they cause so much havoc because they're pushing from the middle and there's less distance to the quarterback that way. And that's why some of those guys, and they've developed here over the last 5-10 years, are now pushing that market up to make it that more expensive. Because traditionally, all we thought of the defensive interior guys is stop the run, stop the run. Now, we've had some good ones, Kevin Williams being one of them over time, but it is a big deal if that interior guy can get push. And that's why they're starting to be looked at and valued as almost an edge rusher, and their money is coming up to that level.
Yeah, and if you have a great one, it makes such a massive difference. Just look, he is obviously an anomaly compared to other defensive tackles around the league, but just look at Aaron Donald and the impact that he's had in being able to do a lot of those things. Reggie White, look, he was classified as a defensive end. That man played everywhere, and he was dominant from the outside, a wide 9, all the way to like a shade nose tackle on certain pass rush downs. Reggie White, in my opinion, is the best defensive player that has ever lived and has ever played football. And it's hard to hear any real pushback. He had like 200 sacks, and he was dominant across like 2 decades. Reggie White is the best defensive player I've ever seen. And I think he's the best defensive player of all time. But that's how that position can really change the game for you. Let's move on to edge rusher, Dave. And how you doing?
I was looking forward to my free bottle of bourbon, but I'll look forward to you even more enjoying yours, because Andre Carter remains on the team. He was not released. He was not waived. And he's part of the initial 53. But the wager is, will he be there as of Thursday? So we get through that first round and see what happens. But you're right. They thought too much of him. They kept him. I didn't think they would.
Now, initially on Sunday, when I released my final prediction for the 53-man roster, I did not have Andre Carter the second on there. But as we were recording, I talked myself into it. Why? I didn't think they'd try to let him slip through waivers because of what Andre Carter is. He is a ball of clay that a coach would want to get their hands on because, you're telling me all I have to do is get this guy in a strength and conditioning program for 2 years and I can make him into a really, really good football player? Okay, I'm in. Like, that's the general construct of Andre Carter. Can they actually take it to that level? Can they actually make him a good football player? I don't know. That's the thing when you talk about defensive linemen. It's a lot of technique. He needs to learn how those pass rush moves. He needs to get into the lab with guys like Danielle Hunter, and he needs to figure that out.
Remember now, he's a little bit different than Danielle Hunter was.
No, that's not what I'm saying. If he needs to figure out a bevy of pass rush moves, that's where a guy like Danielle Hunter can help him. And
no, I agree. But what I'm saying,
and pairs with that power and gets requisite NFL strength with his unique size at 6'7" and the ability to still bend around a corner, that's going to be able to take him to a spot where he could potentially be a starting edge rusher in the National Football League. And that is why you don't let him go.
Hey, but how I was trying to relate it to, if I could speak, when we drafted Danielle, everybody said, why did you draft him? He had no sacks or very few sacks.
Sacks don't matter.
And all that other blah, blah, blah. And Andre Patterson thought, no, I've got a guy here. I'm going to develop him. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what they did. I think they see something similar in Carter. Yeah, and I hope they're right. I hope they're right.
When I say sacks don't matter, of course they matter.
Pressure matter.
What matters more? Affecting the quarterback. And that's where that pressure stat from Pro Football Focus really comes into play. If you can get pressure on the quarterback, you can impact the play. Yeah, sack is the optimal outcome. But if you get pressure, it's like going to like a pizza shop and ordering a pizza, and you want a sausage and pepperoni pizza. All you end up getting delivered is the sausage. Yeah, you're still happy with it. Yeah, you would have wanted that extra meat. That extra meat is the sack.
Mm-hmm.
But the pizza with the sausage on it, instead of the sausage and pepperoni, still pretty damn good. That's a pressure. And that is something that you want. I would rather have the one topping than multiple toppings on the pizza all the time instead of multiple toppings every once in a while, because I know that that's going to make a bigger impact in the football game regularly. Hunter had 70 pressures last year, and people were saying he was washed. He wasn't any good. He stunk. We need to trade him. The infamous one, trade him for Mike Gesicki and a 3rd-round pick. Like, no, you don't trade him because he plays really, really well. And part of it is, like, the big thing with Hunter, he was asked to do a lot of things that weren't playing to his strengths, and he was still good. The problem is him and Zadarius Smith would get to the quarterback, but the secondary was so bad that the quarterback could just throw up before they could really make a humongous impact on the play. So that's where cohesiveness on the back end needs to pair with that pass rush. Now I feel we're going to have some more cohesiveness. If you would have had a capable defensive coordinator running the Vic Fangio scheme last year, capable, let's say it was Sean Desai, who I think is more than capable. That Vikings defense is probably like 24th in the league. 24th in the league is a hell of a lot better than 31st when you're talking about a 13-win football team. You probably don't get blown out multiple times. You probably have at least a couple more wins by more than one score. And a couple of those games, like the Cardinals were like faltered hard on a last-minute drive when we were up 8. The Dolphins were down 15, and they got it to within 8 in the last 2 minutes. So it's not exactly as simple as, oh, you guys had to come back every single game and you guys were bad and all these things. It's not always that simple. And that's why every stat, it is the theme of the show, my mission statement, every stat needs context. If you don't contextualize the numbers don't mean anything. And there are a lot of really smart people out there. And you mentioned one of them earlier, Dave. Eric Eager of Sumer Sports. Love Eric. I think he's a great guy. Anytime he mentions numbers and I ask him about it, he's always able to provide context. And I ask him a lot of questions because I want to try and understand, because he's a mathematician. But a lot of people don't realize he played college football. Mm-hmm. He is a football guy that happens to be a math whiz. And that's why the analytics thing for him, he's able to merge the two because he has that background knowledge in both. And understanding the context behind the numbers is more important than the numbers themselves. Yeah, any person on Twitter can rattle off, oh, he had this EPA per play. I'm like, well, do you know how to calculate EPA per play? Do you know if passer rating even any good is a stat to talk about? Like, that's where, if you can't contextualize the numbers, don't use them, because they're like, I try not to use DVOA because DVOA is not it's not one of the things that I'm super knowledgeable with as far as how it works in depth. So when I talk to people who are smarter than me, I ask questions about that stuff. That is my rant about sacks and pressures. Welcome back to the show. Gary asked why national media hate the Vikings so much. They don't spend time on the Vikings. Why? The Vikings don't sell ad revenue on television. They don't draw in viewers on talk shows. You know who does? Big market teams. The Bears, the Cowboys, the Jets, the Giants, the Eagles. And then you have your anomaly teams. The Chiefs, because of Patrick Mahomes. The Packers. They kind of became quasi-America's team with Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers for the past 30 years. They have a legit national following. Those are the teams that are getting most of the pub and most of the attention. And we aren't, because we're the Vikings. We're in the heart of the Midwest. Like, we don't get as much care in the national media. So when I wouldn't say that they hate us, we don't draw enough ratings for them to talk about us enough. And then I don't think that once they do start talking about us, they haven't studied us enough to really have the proper context for X, Y, and Z. And I think that's the disconnect. I really don't think national media hates us, but that's kind of the long and the short of it. It's the same reason why nobody talks about the Houston Texans. Like, who nationwide wants to hear about the Texans? Texans fans, that's it.
Or the Arizona Cardinals.
They don't sell ad revenue, and that's part of the business. Yeah, and that's something that over the course of the last few years I've really learned is, you not only have to produce good content, but you have to produce good content that people want. People want to hear Skip Bayless screaming about the Cowboys. Why? I have no clue, but people want it. And that's why Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless were once respected newspaper journalists, believe it or not. And if you don't believe me, go watch the Pony Excess, the 30 for 30 on SMU, where they got the death penalty, that college football program. Skip Bayless was one of the lead reporters on that story. And he talks about it. And like, Bayless used to be a true newspaper guy. Like, that's just kind of the way it is. That, like, you have to adapt to media. And guess what? It helps a lot when you're Skip Bayless and now all you can do is sit on TV and scream at somebody else and you get paid millions of dollars. He played the game and he played it well. So, all right, we have a couple more positions to get to because we're running out of time. I thought this might be an abbreviated show. I was wrong.
And we got, because Justin's he'll be on with Dave here in less than 5 minutes.
All right, well, we'll get everybody situated to send them over there. Inside linebacker, no surprises. Brian Asamoah, Jordan Hicks, Ivan Pace Jr., who was one of 3 UDFAs to make the team, and Troy Dye.
Mm-hmm.
No surprises. So we're going to completely skip inside linebacker because that's fine. Cornerback.
Hey, Pace made it. The fact that 3 UDFAs made this team is amazing.
Pretty cool. Let's go to cornerback and safety. We're going to talk about them at once. Cornerback, Byron Murphy Jr., Caleb Evans, Andrew Booth Jr., Kai Blackman, NaJee Thompson. Yes, the special teams may have made the roster. And at safety, 6 guys. All 6 made it. Harrison Smith, Cameron Bynum, Josh Metellus, Lewis Seen, Jay Ward, and Theo Jackson. All of them made the team. Now, what does that mean? I think the Vikings are going to be looking for a corner. I consider the Vikings having 4.5 corners because NaJee Thompson may be listed as a corner. On Vikings Wire, when I write about him, I don't call him a corner. I call him special teams weapon because that's what he is. He's a special teamer that technically has a position. Could he be a decent enough corner? Yeah, but I consider him like a Chris Boyd level corner. Boyd was a special teams gunner. He was a great special teamer. He didn't want him playing corner. That's what NaJee Thompson is sliding into. He's going to be that guy. And I think that could end up working really, really well. I also think, Dave, that when you take a look at all these guys, you have 6 safeties and 4.5 corners. Well, Jay Ward's played outside and slot corner extensively at LSU. Maybe they roll with this and they have Jay Ward doing more star responsibilities, which in the Bill Belichick system, which is what Brian Flores runs, it's called the Apex, where you're playing in the slot and you're doing a lot of those things. Maybe that's the direction they choose to go and not bring in another corner, instead put a couple on the practice squad. I'm very intrigued to see how this ends up playing out, but they have a really talented secondary, and how they end up segmenting things and structuring is going to be really fascinating to see. Kevin Fielder of Vikings Wire wrote up 5 cornerbacks to keep an eye on the Vikings that could potentially bring in. One of them was my boy from South Carolina, Darius Rush, who was a 4th round pick of the Colts, and they waived him today. I was floored. Everybody knew how much I wanted Darius Rush. He was one of my guys. He was the corner on the all Forno team. I loved him, and I hope that they end up bringing him in and he ends up being great. So we'll see how that ends up playing out, but that's the show, guys. The Vikings have a 53-man roster, and we are going to end up back next week. Next Monday is the Labor Day, so there's potential for a show. Dave and I will be in contact, and if we have one, you'll see it. If we don't, we're taking the day off, so be prepared. But we will be back on Wednesday.
I never take a day off from the Vikings.
Oh, I never take a day off from the Vikings, but from sitting down and doing a show, yeah. We're also going to have our first game preview next Wednesday afternoon into evening, talking Vikings, Buccaneers, and a very intriguing Bucs team because they have a lot of talent, but they also don't have a lot of talent. They are a team in real flux right now with big time players at big time positions, not a lot of depth. They had 6 UDFAs make the team, albeit 2 of them should have been drafted. So I'm calling it 4. Sean Tucker only didn't get drafted because of a knee scare, and Raheem Jarrett didn't get drafted. I don't know why. I had a 5th rounder on him, but I know a lot of people who had him in like a 2nd or 3rd round.
We'll get into it.
Yeah, we'll get into all of that. Guys, the season's here. Get excited. Get ready. Thank you to everybody who put us over 1,000 subscribers. Yes. Last night, our goal was to get to 1,000 subscribers. Like, I set a lofty goal for us to get to 1,000 subscribers by week 1. We did it before the cut down, and we are incredibly proud of that. And we have you guys to thank for supporting us and believing that this is some of the best content out there on the internet. Thank you very much for joining us. We will be back next week to talk about your Minnesota Vikings. I'm Tyler. He's Dave. And as you saw earlier, Eclair and her poop on my fingers. We all say SKOL Vikings.
Well, I encourage everybody to go see Justin over at Purple and Gold for Days. He's on here probably right now. Move on over, catch him. He's part of Vikings First and SKOL team. And we'll see you on the podcast side of the rest of the week as we break all this down. And what do we say? We say SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. It helps us grow this community that we all love, our Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of Tyler Fornes and myself, Dave Stefano, thank you so dearly for watching The Real Forno Show. SKOL, everyone.